Okay, I mean, let's do an evaluation of reality just for a second. Let's look at the situation in America objectively. Maybe some of the elements that are usually overlooked in America, or that are only overlooked in isolation. But let's look at it as a whole. Let's look at it as an organic whole. First of all, roughly half of all of the current working age population in America today, the adult population, between 40 to 50% of the adults who are in America today, who are, in the leading positions in America, whether it's in business or in government or what have you, about half of the adult population in America grew up with divorced parents, means single mothers mostly. Okay, well, we're all aware of the emotional and the developmental issues that can affect kids when they're growing up in broken homes, homes without fathers, and so on. There is trauma from that, no doubt. No matter how great that mother is, no matter how great that father may be, a child without two parents who are actively involved in bringing that child up, that child has a much harder time than a child who has both parents. That's a statistical fact. Okay, so half of your adults grew up like that. They were impacted by that. Then if you look at the statistics of abuse and neglect that was reported throughout the 1980s and 1990s, somewhere between 25% and 40% of all American adults today suffered abuse while they were growing up. Physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, emotional neglect, and so on. Do you understand? So you have that trauma as well in your adult population, and all of the associated psychological aftermath of that they're dealing with, that they're coping with. At least 10% of American adults today grew up in poverty and economic hardship when they were children. And now in adulthood, 25% of adult American women have been victims of rape or attempted rape. And half of all American women have experienced some form of sexual violence. A quarter of all men, American men, have suffered some form of sexual violence in the United States. Now, if you look at the other crime statistics of the past, say 4 decades, then that would leave you with 20% of all Americans who know someone who's been murdered. It's a brutal society. The people have grown up with severe and abnormal conditions in that country, all of which are deteriorative to their mental health. And now think about the fact that an adult in America today, say someone who was born in 1990, if they were born in 1990, they're 35 years old now, they likely spent 50,000 hours watching television, 40,000 hours surfing the internet, and up to 20,000 hours playing video games. That's 110,000 hours of passive media consumption, 35% of their entire life. That's more time than they probably spent working or studying or even sleeping. It's equivalent to spending every waking moment of an entire decade glued to a screen. I mean, in fact, if you want to be accurate about it, we should just subtract the time that they probably slept. Only count their waking hours. In that case, the average 35-year-old American has literally spent more than half of their life watching television, surfing the internet, or playing video games. Passive consumption of media, roughly 55% of their lives. I mean, no wonder whenever anything even mildly interesting happens in their life, they'll say, wow, it was just like a movie, without fail, Because media is literally their frame of reference. Media, popular media, not actual experience. Now combine that with the real trauma issues that they have from growing up and from the violence and the insecurity of their society where they live. They're not processing any of that. They're not processing anything that they've been through. Instead, there's just escapism, avoidance, isolation, desensitization, and this, escape into false versions of reality, simplified versions of reality, and so on. The Instagram world, the virtual universe of the internet becomes their unnatural, natural habitat. The average 35-year-old American male has spent roughly 3,000 hours watching pornography. That's equivalent to about 5 months of continuous non-stop viewing. Okay, obviously all of this combined has devastating cognitive impact. Attention spans evaporate. There's a sort of a constant state of partial attention where people are continuously distracted. They're kind of paying attention and kind of not. It erodes their critical thinking skills, their problem-solving skills. It deteriorates both their working memory and their long-term memory. It erodes their emotional regulation. It causes anxiety. It causes depression. It causes volatility. It impairs their social skills, their communication skills, their empathy, their ability to even interact with people face to face properly. You know, it programs you with a kind of behavioral addiction, low impulse control, on and on. Not to mention information overload, where you're accessing far more information than you could ever process. And all this just ends up making your whole perspective of the world an incoherent jumble of random bits of data, random theories and opinions, and so on. And again, remember, all of this cognitive damage is being inflicted on people who most likely are already carrying real life trauma that has never been dealt with from their childhood and from growing up. And okay, if you can afford it, you can go to therapy. Everybody's going to a therapist, right? Well, over 60% of therapists themselves report that they themselves have psychological and emotional disorders. Because of course they do. They come from the same society. You know, they try to rationalize that by calling themselves wounded healers. But very often they wound more than they heal. Because there's a very significant number of therapy patients who report abuse of one form or another from their therapists. I mean, ideally, you'd be able to talk to your family. That's what normal people would do. But we've already said that a lot of them, at least 40, 50% of them, come from broken homes. And about 30% of all American adults report that they are estranged from their families, from their parents, or from their siblings. The average close friendship in America doesn't last more than 5 years. Forget about romantic relationships, dating relationships, that barely makes it to 2 years. Usually it's only a few months. Even most marriages don't last a decade in the United States. You're people who are adrift. It's a society that's adrift. There's no anchor, there's no port, there's no dock, there's no rudder, there's no map, and there's no destination. That's your society. I mean, look, America, the land of opportunity, right? Think about this. The best and greatest country in the world, the best country that ever existed, liberty, freedom, prosperity, on and on and on. But look at you. It's the land of milk and honey, but everyone is always trying to find a side hustle. Everyone is endlessly talking about being on their grind. You know, motivational speakers are a $1 billion industry. Life coaches, self-help books. Social media is full of inspirational quotes, so-called, on and on, for supposedly people who are living in the best country in the world. While you look like, to everyone else, you look like you're constantly on the verge of a nervous breakdown. You look like you're barely holding it together. Like you need someone to pump you up just to help you get out of bed in the morning. How great can it really be? You flood social media with that stuff. All that you can do it, you know, the you can do it affirmations, all the you will survive this posts. You're beautiful, you're important, you're special, you're a champion. All of that. You flood social media with that. You flood social media with those things. And everyone in the world sees it. You understand? Everyone in the world sees that, and it looks to them like America is staring in the bathroom mirror trying to pull themselves together to face the day. That's what it looks like. You see what I mean? It looks very sad to people outside. You know, people in countries that don't proclaim to be the greatest and most wonderful nation on earth, well, they don't have to hype themselves up just to do normal things. They don't have to hype themselves up just to function in the world. People in Africa, Asia, the Middle East, Latin America, so-called, they don't need motivational speakers. They don't need life coaches. They don't need inspirational Instagram quotes just to be able to stop crying in the office parking lot and go to work. Honestly, it always looks like it's a toss-up with you, whether you're going to post an inspirational, motivational quote on social media or jump off the roof. You know, to the rest of the world, your society looks like a wreck, looks like an emotional wreck. But you see, that's because the rest of the world did not spend a third of their life glued to a screen. The average person in the global south has spent a fraction of the time that Americans have spent consuming media. They also have better relationships with their families. They have better friendships. They have better support networks. You know, they have better ways of coping with trauma. They have better ways of coping with difficulty and so on, even though they're not fortunate enough to live in the best country in the world, you know?